Well, I'm afraid I took this topic way too literally and was trying to figure out. My story is really about figuring out what teen spirit smells like. It doesn't smell like Kurt Cobain's cologne that was around, what, 20 years ago. It's trying to figure out what real teen spirit smells like. Well, in first pass, it smells like BO. Being adolescent males are notoriously bad in their hygiene, greasy hair, unwashed clothes, stinky as hell. My experience, I shared this thing. I worked at Burger Chef. That's the third of McDonald's, Burger King, and Burger Chef. And I'd like to think I had something to do with them going out of business and bankrupt, but that's another story. I'd come home from work, after cleaning out the fry vat and mopping up greasy floors. And I mean, I stank to high heaven, greasy, gross smells. My mother made me put my clothes in the washing machine separate from everything else. Now, I'd come home and I'd wash my face and brush my teeth, but then I just crash. So my bed, after about a week or so, I'm sure was a little funky. But it's really not that. I mean, biologists talk about all the different kinds of sweat scents. So you have like heat sweat. Well, heat sweat doesn't really smell like much of anything because it's the simplest chemistry and it evaporates quickly and it cools you off and fine. And there's effort sweat, pulled muscles, hefting and toting stuff, or the kind of stuff that athletes do when they're at practice and come back to the locker room and dump all their stuff in their lockers and leave it there for a couple of days. Well, that's effort sweat, like multiplied by 5. So that's another sweat, but that's not as bad as anxiety and stress sweat. And you got kids in high school, and oh my God, it's like academic underachievement, it's social rejection, you name it, it's anxiety, and you can smell it. When I later became a college professor, much later in my career, when I got to the point that I could walk into a classroom full of freshman or sophomore college students, inhale deeply and feel just invigorated from that anxiety sweat smell. It was just, oh my God, they're on it. They're excited. They're rolling. They're challenged. They're going to do well. Well, or not. Okay. Well, so what smell am I left with? I mean, that's a good one. But then I remember an all-nighter I pulled working on my poetry journal. I was supposed to have, write a poem a week in this journal. And of course, that was never the highest priority any particular day. So I'm stuck. I got like a dozen poems to write by the next morning. So I'm going to like do it. I'm in my room at home, and there's certainly heat sweat because my room's hot. There's certainly effort sweat because I'm struggling to do this stuff. And by later in the evening, there's certainly a lot as it gets worse and worse, anxiety and stress, sweat, smell. Well, and there's probably some other more furtive smells that have to do with little activities that I might do to reduce my level of anxiety, however temporarily. Okay, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, my dad knocks on my door. Now, my dad was a Lutheran minister, he was really a liberal one, but nevertheless, when he opened the door and said, "This room smells like sin," he did not mean it just smelled bad. He meant it smelled some particular way. Okay. Well, biologists talk about another kind of sweat smell, which is sex sweat. I mean, duh. It smells different. It's got that musky, I don't know, maybe a little skunky, maybe aloe smell. And when I was a professor, a student would walk in smelling of smoke. I hated that. But I hated compulsive masturbators that would come in just reeking. Although I remember women telling me that they'd sometimes follow one of those dudes around campus for days. I couldn't figure that out, but maybe it's an attractant. Well, Casanova thought it was an attractant. He used sex sweat on his upper lip to help with the seduction. So clearly that's a good smell, or at least it works sometimes. I mean, I was much older, maybe as a graduate student or something, and had some innocent, inexperienced young lady over for dinner. And I remember that powerful, musky aloe smell from her, which she probably didn't know that she had, or even if she did, what it might have meant. But it's not sweaty bodies that teen spirit is really all about anyway. There was a time at the college at which I taught when college dances included a lot of, what was it called? Humping, bumping, grinding. Which we talked about in class is the most obscenely sexist thing you could possibly imagine. But that happened at the college dances. And school newspaper actually reported one of these, that they had to clean up the floors and cleaned up soiled condoms all over the floors. Well, that has a particular sort of smell, doesn't it? Well, I go back to being 15 or 16 again and working for the Purdue farms for like 3 weeks doing corn detasseling. Now, they kept the boy crew and the girl crew about 20 rows apart because apparently with that smell of corn detasseling, which is a public, healthy, natural smell, but smelled, well, reminded you there's a connection between the continuities of animal seed and plant seed. So I choose to think that that pure, natural, public smell of corn detasseling is the true smell of teen spirit.